was financial VP, and I had a routine that I'd go in to check my mail till about twice a week. And that was when we were still down on West 7th Street. And Kay Jennis was there, and I saw a letter, and I always read who it was from, and I went, oh, what is this all about? And I opened it, and I read through it, and went, well, isn't this nice? This woman, in her bequest, left us $100. And Kay came over and looked, and we're both looking, and then pretty soon I counted all the zeros. And I went, no, it's $100,000. And so I said, okay, we're not going to say anything to anybody right away because I'm going to put this in Linda Hartshey's till. And so I called her and I said, there's a letter in there I think you need to read. And she said, oh, I was just down there. I'll go in a couple days. I said, no, there's a letter in there you need to read. Yep. And so she came down and she called me and we were like, well, what do we do now? And so we decided to call an emergency meeting of our executive board, as I recall. And we met pretty regularly anyway, so we let them all read the letter and sit there, and we didn't say anything. And then pretty soon, they're all digesting it. And then they started talking, and I can't remember if it was you or somebody else said, you're not saying anything, Helena. You're like a shrinking violet. What's going on here? And because I usually wasn't a shrinking violet on the board meetings anyway. And I said, well, I've put a lot of thought into this. And I really think that this should be a wonderful cushion for a long time to come. I don't want us to rest on our laurels and not quit fundraising, because that's what binds League together, and it's such a learning experience to go through fundraising and all that development. And so we started kicking it around, and little by little Robbie got going on an ad hoc committee, and I served on that first ad hoc as a sustainer because I went sustaining that next spring.
And right. So you went sustaining right away.
And there was about 15 of us there at the first meeting. It was a pretty good sized meeting. And I'll never forget, it was at Val Warner's house, and I was contemplating, how am I going to get back down this driveway?
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
And anyway, one thing led to another, and here we are, very proud of our endowment.
You know what's interesting? See, you two were in on this from the beginning. Right. And I show up at that December general meeting, and somehow or another, all of you, Linda Hartshey, everybody on the exec, had managed to keep this a complete secret from the general membership. And Linda gets up there at this December general meeting, which was a luncheon, as I recall, which was unusual. But at any rate, she is up there and reads the entire letter announcing this gift. And I can remember just, oh, you've got to be kidding, after all those years of fundraising, that kind of financial security. And you guys had already talked about it. But for the rest of the membership, this was just all of a sudden everything just started percolating. It was an enormous moment. And I think about these, you have those seminal moments. I know that League members in the last, in 2020 they're going to remember COVID, and the ones that were in 2002, they're going to remember the roof caving in on the building. Right. But those of us of a certain age, we will always remember where we were when we first heard about that bequest.
Right. I kind of get chills every time I'm at a meeting, and a sustainer meeting or luncheon, and it's brought up because it was just so memorable. And I came home from that letter, and Mike that night said, anything new today? And I went, not much. I picked up mail at Junior League, and he always referred to, your Little League work again, which irritated the heck out of me. And I said, and we were just endowed with $100,000, and then what do you want for dinner?
Atta girl.
Well, and Linda Hartshey so you and Linda knew ahead of time, and having an emergency board meeting, we'd never had an emergency board meeting. And so I remember, I wouldn't say it was a sleepless night, but I could not figure out what could be an emergency enough to have an emergency board meeting. And so, and then Linda was such a gracious hostess all the time.
Yeah.
I remember where I heard it because it was in her kitchenette area, and we're all getting together, rapping away, and then $100,000. And in this time, Helena's right. We were working so hard at fundraisers. We had about 5 or 6 a year, and some of them were flops.
Yeah.
And so to $100,000, I think everyone was like, "This is the cushion we need to move forward, and not always feel like, can we do this? Well, can we make enough money to do it?" I mean, that's how we lived up until then.
Yeah.
And then this was
that's so true.
oh, okay. Hey, we have this, so now we can look at a bigger picture. And I think more than the money, it gave us that.
Yeah.
A different feeling towards what League could do.
Confidence.
Yeah.
And it was such a relief being finance VP to see people fall in line with it and not have to pry them into it like some of the other things we went through with different projects. I mean, they didn't just fly through. We were very scrutinizing, and I was afraid they'd go, "Oh, we don't have to do that now," and thank gosh they didn't. They got behind it, and it was like you say, seminal moment for me in League. I thought going on to be VP of Finance was, because I was never a treasurer. It was when we rolled over to a new system, and so it was like me in finance, baptism by fire, and then I get this letter, and fortunately I've been treasurer of a lot of other organizations, so it wasn't,
You were always treasurer.
Yes, I still am treasurer of one of the groups that I was treasurer of that back then. And
I think the other thing that was cool is when I was in League, the community side was always the side that I enjoyed being part of, reaching out to other nonprofits, etc. And there were so many small needs in our community, and we were so strict about it had to have a volunteer component that was meaningful, not just a token.
It had to be meaningful.
And yet there were these organizations that if you knew if they had a few $100s for this, or maybe $1,000 for this, it could make a real difference for them. But to put together a whole project just wasn't feasible. And so we were just saying no and no and no to the people that were coming to us.
It was especially bad because we had spent 3 years fundraising for the library. And to back up, what a lot of young actives don't understand was that the impetus for this bequest from the Mildred Anderson estate, from Mildred herself, was because of the $75,000 that we gave to the library. That had been her husband's dream, was to have this library completely rebuilt and redone in a beautiful new facility. And I think somewhere in the translation over the years, just how much that $75,000 was and what it meant to the League to raise that kind of money, it gets lost because $75,000 doesn't seem as much. And I think especially when you consider, it was just a couple of years ago that the League gave $80,000 to refurbish the Children's Hands-On Gallery at the Art Center. So I looked it up just out of curiosity. That $75,000 that it took us 3 years to raise would be the equivalent of a gift of $183,500 to date. Now, can you imagine Junior League going and raising $183,500? And as for volunteer component, I mean, everybody participated in it. Yeah, we had 1 year 5 fundraisers. Cookbook going on in a party, and the stock market, and the discovery shop, and I mean, it was a lot of fundraising to make that happen. But it was huge.
It was huge. It was just huge.
And we
it was
couldn't make those small grants. We had to say no, even though we wanted to. We didn't have any mechanism in place to fund them.
I was on the first committee that was going to distribute those funds for the first time, and I was amazed at how many requests came in. And it was just really, suddenly we had to pare down too, which ones we were going to pick. And that was really tough because you wanted to just be able to give to all of them. And we tried to let people know, come back again, and it's going to be an annual thing. And it was always interesting to see what came forward and what kind of requests there were.
So you chaired the endowment ad hoc to begin with, and then you also chaired the first community council that made the grants, right?
I think so.
I think you
that
did.
was the first one. Okay, because I did do community council. Was that the first?
Well, I remember
Didn't even
serving
remember
on
that.
I remember serving on your community council because I was Kids on the Block chair that
Sure.
year.
Yeah.
And we were in Barb Magoon's living room. We were, trying to draw up how do we make this work so we can give, an extra $32 and some cents to this organization. I mean, we were really splitting the finances trying to make that work.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we were real cognizant of keeping it so it is intergenerational, and we always had sustainers involved in this particular branch of League.
That
And
was a wonderful idea. Where did that come from, to have sustainers serve on the endowment committee? Does anybody remember?
I had suggested a rotation thing. I will remember
There you
that.
go.
Should have known. Okay,
And
that's
'cause-
that missing link I was wondering
And we
about.
used to do that a lot at the synagogue. Is you didn't have a whole new committee every year,
Yeah.
so you rotated around. And the first ones, volunteered to serve. There was a group that said 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, and that's how we kept the continuity of new and old. Because I've been in and out of there a couple of times now, but that's okay.
Sort of like me on and off that endowment committee like 4 times.
Yeah. But, and then we started with those parties, to try and get it
At the League's
boosted
90th
up,
anniversary.
and get more people involved in giving to it. Because I can remember if someone in League passed away that I was close to, I would give to it in their memory. But that was, some of us just
Right.
smaller donations. So for about 3 years we tried the parties,
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
like a cocktail party thing. And I said to him, okay, this has been good, but we're not bringing in the kind of revenue that I'd like us to do. I said, let's try a letter campaign.
Yeah, yeah.
And so,
Well, you remember we used to make the joke, an awful lot of us have to die to have any growth in this town.
yeah, so I was kind of a thorn in the side. What do you mean you don't want to have another party? I said, we're not getting what we need. And so we've done that ever since. And
Yeah,
I
the
think,
letter writing campaign has been just
Yeah.
as successful as those intensive work
Yeah.
fundraisers were.
Yeah.
And that's because if you look at the list of who donates, it's by and large it's sustainers. Because we understand what went into building that endowment to begin with.
but it's important for the actives to understand it too, because we want to keep it going.
Yeah.
And they're going to be sustainers quicker than we were sustainers. So, anyway.
It was interesting in talking with Debbie Hubbard. Of course, Debbie Hubbard, sustaining member, she was also executive director of the Siouxland Community Foundation. She's got a whole story that should be told too, because she was the one that had to make the first presentation to the active membership of Junior League. And, this all happened after the 3 of us were in our active years. And in the early years, when I served on the endowment committee with you and after you'd gone off of this, I served with your mom in the early 90s when she was one of the first sustainers on there. But in those days, the League managed the money in those first years. And we had, from our own sustaining membership, I remember Linda Stimmick was there and Judy Munsinger, and they served as financial advisors and investment advisors, and we did all of that ourselves, as well as administering those grants that went out from the Mildred Anderson Fund. And sometime after we went sustaining in early 2000s, by then both Linda Stimmick and Judy Munsinger were gone.
Yep.
In fact, everybody who had been an active member in 1988 when that bequest was made, we were all gone. And for the first time, this whole controversy of we have this money sitting here and it should be being used. Why is it sitting in an endowment fund? We could be spending it on projects, we could be doing this. And so for the first time, now that it hit that benchmark that you all declared on that endowment ad hoc was 250,000, that's the benchmark. When we get to that, and it's grown to that level, then it was going to be reexamined. And boy, you know, we are fortunate for the good guidance that we received, especially from Debbie, that money didn't just disappear, because it could have.
Yeah.
And that was always what the fear
That was absolutely.
Yeah.
That we weren't going to have this opportunity again. So to think that somebody else was going to bequest this, you know, that it'd just keep coming just made no sense. And so, yeah, that really was, I don't know if a fear is the right word, but yes, a very big concern that this be something that goes on and on. So, and look at how many grants we've given out. What's the number on it?
Oh, I don't even know.
Yeah. It's phenomenal.
It's
It was
just
only about
phenomenal.
5 that first year, wasn't it? It was pretty small.
Yeah, it was pretty small. And the first
we were
ones
first
really,
just trying to figure out how we're going to do it. Was
Yeah.
the, you know.
yeah, and we thought giving $300 was a big deal in those days. And then quickly, better up it to 5.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I tried to learn a little bit about Mildred Anderson after that, and you know, the
Dance,
pavilion
dance pavilion.
was
yeah.
named after her husband, and that's designed. They met each other at a pavilion in Lincoln, Nebraska, and they
that
used to go
story.
to dances there. And she wanted that pavilion like a replica of what they met at. So she was very into preserving history, and she was quite an interesting person.
Yeah, but interestingly, she wasn't a LEAP member, but she sure knew us and sure knew what we did in the community, and she sure knew what we did for that library.